So good morning and welcome to the 4th Annual LA84 Foundation Summit, Pathways to Inclusion. My name is Tamara Christopherson. I was a member of the 2000 Sydney Olympic team, and I serve currently as the president of the U.S. Olympians and Paralympians, and recently I joined the bid team at LA 2024. It's my pleasure to be the Master of Ceremonies today for the summit. Our conference this morning reflects the growing interest of sports for athletes with disabilities, as well as a growing awareness that disabled athletes gain the same social and health benefits from sport participation as other athletes do. Recent events provide spectacular evidence of the increasing stature and awareness of sport for disabled athletes. For example, the London 2012 Paralympic Games sold 2.7 million tickets and drew a worldwide television audience of 3.8 billion people. The 2015 Special Olympics World Summer Games in Los Angeles recorded billions of social media impressions and engagements and attracted 250,000 spectators and trended #1 on Facebook during the opening ceremony. So it's a big deal. High-profile world events like the Paralympics and World Games would not be possible with the progress at the local level thanks to you all. This year in Los Angeles, CIF City Selection announced plans to launch a sports-level division for disabled athletes in 2016. And this summer, the first ever Angel City Games, a multi-sport event for youth and adult athletes, took place at UCLA. The summit today presents speakers who have worked at the local, national, and international levels. The program includes our keynote address and 3 panels. We'll try to leave time in the program for audience questions and comments, but we do invite your active participation. Before our keynote speaker takes the podium, I would like to introduce the LA84 Foundation President and IOC member and my personal Olympic hero, Anita DeFrantz.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, and I really appreciate all of you being here, despite the challenges of leaving your horse tied up out front. I know it's hard, but welcome to the house that sport built. We are the legacy of the 1984 Games, and we're still serving youth through sport and enhancing the knowledge of sport and society. I say this is a house that sport built because the finances from those games made it possible to build these facilities. The other place was here since 1910, I believe, 1910, 11. I wasn't here when it was built, but it's been here a long time. And we will be serving this community for a long time to come. I have long believed that sports is a birthright. Every person deserves access to sport. And the foundation has been fulfilling that commitment over these years. Indeed, in the last 10 years alone, we've made 139 grants to youth organizations that have sports opportunities for youth with disabilities, totaling about $8 million in just this last decade. So we are walking our walk and not just talking the talk. And I guess today's gathering also speaks to that we want to learn more and find ways to make sure that every youth, every child in Southern California has the magic of sports, which was brought to us by those Olympians who competed in 1984. Speaking of Olympians, we have another one here who will be part of the program and is also a member of the board of directors. You'll hear him later, well, I see him now, but you'll hear him later, Rayford Johnson. And similarly, although not, and also a member of the board who will be speaking today is the leader of the World Games, none other than Patrick McClenahan, I'm so sorry. He too will be speaking, and I think I should stop speaking. We also should have one other board member who might be having some trouble parking, but I know she intends to be here, Maureen Kendall, so when she comes, you'll get a chance to meet her. It is a great pleasure for me to see you all here, and I'm sure the seats will fill in with people who are not as lucky as you were, but we'll have a full house today and a lot to share and learn. I also want to thank those sponsors who supported this event. We have Toyota and Coca-Cola, the estate of Michael Jackson, and the Branca family. So my thanks to those who've supported this event. And now, with that, I should turn it over to Wayne Wilson. Oh, there you are. Thank you all again for being here.
Thank you. I just have a few program notes. Thank you, first of all, for being here. First comment about the program. We've changed the format this year from previous years. We're going to do lunch at the end of the program rather than in the middle of it. So during lunch, there are no speeches, there's no program. How cool is that? You can eat, talk to your colleagues, take your time, and leave when you want to leave. Second, Marissa Watkins, the Special Olympics Global Messenger, who was scheduled to appear in the 11 o'clock session with Rayford Johnson, can't be here today, but Dustin Plunkett, who also is a Global Messenger, has kindly agreed on short notice to take her place. Third, this conference is based on the assumption that there is going to be a growing demand for sports that serve young people with disabilities. And the number of young people who have disabilities and who would be able to participate in programs if they were available is quite large. The estimates of exactly how large that is vary. They vary in part because of differing definitions of disability. The CDC, for example, the Centers for Disease Control, estimate that 15% of children and adolescents have a disability. By contrast, the annual Disabilities Statistics Compendium, which is based primarily on census data, puts the rate of disability for kids between the ages of 5 and 17 at 5.4%. But even at this lower estimate, we're talking about 3 million kids nationally and 283,000 in the state of California. And if you add 18-year-olds to that, the California number goes up to about 300,000. Fourth, the summit's subtitle makes a distinction between athletes with intellectual disabilities and athletes with physical disabilities. And that might lead you to believe that these two categories are completely separate. In reality, they aren't. Many people with intellectual disabilities also have a physical impairment. And the Paralympic movement, which typically is seen as something that is exclusively about physical disability, actually has 10 eligibility categories, one of which is intellectual impairment. So there is some overlap between those two general categories. And then finally, a comment about terminology. While the words disabled and disability are widely used when discussing participants in programs for people with special needs, some people have argued that those terms are inappropriate labels for athletes who clearly have a great deal of ability. And it should be noted that the International Paralympic Committee has now moved to a practice of using the word impairment rather than disability, and makes a point of saying that the Paralympic Games are about ability, not disability. Some critics also charge that media coverage of events like the Special Olympics or the Paralympic Games, which dwell excessively on competitors' impairments rather than their accomplishments, is patronizing. So I'm not suggesting that we attempt here today to use other words or that we avoid talking about the adversity that athletes have overcome. I'm simply pointing out that these criticisms exist, and I would also suggest that in the future we may see the evolution of the words we use and the narratives that we create. So those are my comments. I hope you enjoy the program. I encourage you to engage with our speakers, and if there's anything the foundation staff can do to help you while you're here, please let us know. Thanks.
Good morning. Great to see so many familiar faces. So many of you were involved in the World Games. Tim Shriver tried to take the ability or disability issue, and he would call it different abilities, but then he put it together and called it diff abilities. But I don't think that ever caught on. Did it? No. I'm here representing the World Games, but I'm here most importantly representing being the dad of Kelly. My daughter Kelly is 28 years old. She has cerebral palsy. She's also in a wheelchair, so we know the unique situations and difficulties as a parent, as a family, for her brother, all that we go through with Kelly with cerebral palsy, but also having physical disabilities, and all that we go through, in whether it's in malls or life in general, of what the challenges are. We've been through and appreciate individual education plans, IEPs, for those of you that are in education. We also appreciate the incredible challenge of advocating for a child. We went through a challenge of wanting to advocate for the classroom. And we were told, nope, you can't. You can only advocate for your own child. And to this day, Hoover High School now has a bus called Kelly's Bus, so that the classroom can take field trips. So I so appreciate the interest and the efforts that are represented in this room across all spectrums of caring for youth with disabilities. So as was mentioned, through sport, we can create better health, we can create better education opportunities, and we can create better opportunities to experience all that life has to offer, all the good things life has to offer. And quite honestly, everyone is deserving of that. And I think that the message that we so put out there about Special Olympics and the World Games was the value of every individual, that when you learn to love our athletes and appreciate their abilities, you tend to look at all people of differences and appreciate their value to our communities. And so I think that's the overall message of this day today, is figuring out how we can best serve people throughout our community. And communities are made better for it. We also focused on that perhaps the greatest thing that we could do for people with intellectual disabilities or disabilities is to change the hearts and minds of people without disabilities, so that kids befriend them in school, so that employers give them jobs. Those are the long-term things that we should always be thinking forward to the legacy of all that we do in serving our youth. I want to thank the LA84 Foundation for making this the topic of this year's summit. Just that statement alone wouldn't exist several years ago. I mean, just the fact that we've gotten to this point and have a gathering like this to talk about this subject is fantastic. So I'm gonna share some things with you about the World Games that I think are pertinent to all that we're trying to do to serve youth with disabilities through sports. And so just to get you warmed up a little bit, I'm going to show you a video that a company called Adore Creative, who produces big international videos. They produced the video that Sochi used for $2 million. Sochi paid for that to win the Winter Games. Adore came to us and said, we want to help. And I said, we don't have that kind of budget. And they said, we'll do it for free. And this is what aired in our closing ceremony. So this will give you a sense. If you were at the Games, you'll remember it. If you weren't at the Games, you'll get a good sense of what the Games were about.
They came from all over the world, over land, over water, overcoming obstacles and coming to triumph, coming to win, to compete, to inspire, coming to be brave. They came to Los Angeles. They came to rise up.
You're broken down and tired of living life on the merry-go-round, and you can't find a fighter, but I see it in you, so we gon' walk it out. Move mountains, we gon' walk it out and move mountains. And I'll rise like the day. I'll rise up, I'll rise unafraid. I'll rise up, and I'll do it 1,000 times again. And I'll rise up, I like the waves. I'll rise up, in spite of the ache. I'll rise up, and I'll do it 1,000 times again. The silence isn't quiet, and it feels like it's getting hard to breathe. And I know you feel like dying, but I promise we'll take the world to its feet. Move mountains, bring it to its feet. Move mountains, and I'll rise up. I'll rise like the day. I'll rise up. I'll rise unafraid. I'll rise up, and I do it 1,000 times again. All we need is hope, and for that we have each other, and for that we have each other. And we will rise, we will rise, we will rise. Oh, we'll rise. I'll rise up, rise like the day. I'll rise up in spite of the ache. I will rise 1,000 times again, and we'll rise up. I like the waves. We'll rise up in spite of the ache. We'll rise up, and we'll do it 1,000 times again.
You might have noticed this quite a lot. It was called our celebratory pose. Don't you think we should do that this morning? Huh? Celebratory pose. If you saw our logo, the logo was the celebratory figure representing the courage, the determination, and the joy of our athletes. It's at the center of everything that we did was planning around the athletes. Inside the circle of acceptance and inclusion, which was our mission, create awareness that leads to acceptance and inclusion of people with intellectual disabilities, and really a celebration of all people of differences. And then the multicolors represent the diversity of 165 nations coming to Los Angeles, and how we could share that message of acceptance and inclusion with every single corner of this community. Just to share a few facts with you, a couple have already been given, but we had about 9,000 athletes and coaches from 165 countries. It's the largest gathering of nations in the history of Los Angeles. And the beauty of it was that those 165 countries were perfectly mirrored by the diversity of our community, the most diverse community in the world. What an incredible opportunity. 20% of the sports were unified. It was athletes with and without intellectual disabilities competing together. We had, when they first arrived, we had 85 host towns from San Diego to San Luis Obispo that hosted them for 3 days to get acclimated to the time period, to put on cultural events, to really great grassroots opportunity to share the message of acceptance and inclusion. Opening ceremony, we had about 63,000 in attendance, shown by ESPN, our official broadcast partner, which went right to the heart of awareness that leads to acceptance and inclusion. We went to every network. My background's in sports television, and I really believe that this had value, that we weren't looking for a handout. We weren't saying, hey, please, 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 can we have some PSAs? We thought that this was incredible programming, compelling programming that networks would like to compete for, and ESPN stepped up in a huge way. And we simply asked them to be partners with us in getting these inspirational stories in front of as many people as possible. They produced 40 vignettes of athletes from around the world that aired in sports centers or Road to the World Games. And then they produced opening ceremony with all of the bells and whistles that they would do for an NFL football game. And that aired in 170 countries around the world. A true game changer for ESPN. I mean, for ESPN as well, but I'll tell that in a minute, but a true game changer for Special Olympics. They did 11 hours of programming during the week, a half-hour special every night. The outpouring from the viewers were such that they switched to hours on Wednesday, and they did hours for the rest of the week. During opening ceremony, their director, who directs major sports events, we had our torch run that came from Greece. I had the honor of going to Greece, and from the rays of the sun, we lit the torch, and UPS brought it over, and then it 3 legs went across the United States, and then we had 12 days of torch run throughout California. And as it came into the Coliseum that night in opening ceremony, we had some significant moments. We had an athlete from Iran pass the torch to an athlete from Israel. We had an athlete from Cuba pass the torch to an athlete from the United States. And at that moment, the director in the ESPN truck lost it. He got so emotional, he couldn't call cameras. He couldn't say, ready 2-2, ready 4-4. The technical director had to take it over. And at that moment, I'm told the entire truck broke out into laughter, just nervous laughter, because everybody was feeling that at that moment. Their producer, Kate Jackson, came up to me after the show at the JW Marriott and said, Patrick, I'm not even 40 yet. And I just helped change the world. What do I do now? How do I make producing a college football game seem meaningful anymore? And then John Skipper, the head of all of ESPN, the night after the opening ceremony, he came from behind, spun me around and said, marching in the opening ceremony with the athletes, one of the most significant experiences in my life. Wait until you see what ESPN does. And then the other highlight for ESPN, by the way, was that they employed one of our own. Special Olympic athlete, if you saw the opening ceremony, was the analyst. He actually was hired as a reporter or as a studio host or whatever, and then they sent him a revised contract saying, actually, he's an analyst because he has specific knowledge of the subject matter. And that's Dustin Plunkett, and Dustin is here today, right there. Dustin was a valued member of our staff, had a lot of responsibility, oversaw all of the, how many uniforms did you organize and order? 30,000 volunteers. He organized all of that and was a valued member of our team. There were 25 sports, 209 individual events. 46 world records were broken for Special Olympics at the Games. And then we had approximately, with the festivals and everything, we had approximately 350,000 people that attended. Awareness was the key, and that was our, this was a vehicle. This was the most incredible moment of the lives for all of those athletes. But they represent 4.5 million athletes in Special Olympics around the world, and 200 million athletes estimated around the world with intellectual disability. So it was really a vehicle for us to share the message of acceptance and inclusion. We had 1,543 news media credentialed from 80 different countries that came to cover the events. And as was mentioned earlier, we had 2.8 billion impressions through social media during the weeks of the game. And then we had almost 9,000 trained and assigned volunteers that had specific jobs that we trained over a 2-week period. And then fans in the stands. This was really an incredible effort. We didn't charge tickets for events. It was all volunteer. We had 5,200 team leaders who signed up on our website to say, I'll bring at least 10 or more people. That resulted in registered 112,000 fans in the stands. I had a representative of Special Olympics from Germany come up to me the night after opening ceremony, after the first day of competition, and he wanted to show me something. He seemed concerned, but he wanted to show, and he showed me this picture, and it was of the swim stadium with a line outside of people waiting to get in. And with tears in his eyes, he said, never before has somebody waited to see a Special Olympics event. We had that with several of our events throughout the weeks, but it just built throughout the week. The number of people in the community that came out and showed their support, believing that every one of them that came out, if you come out for Special Olympics or Angel City Games or any event like that, you know that volunteers come out saying, I'm here to help, I'm here to, and by the end of the day, they're like, okay, who's helping who here? I just got a perspective of am I making the most out of my gifts? But I also just got a perspective of overcoming adversity with courage, determination, and joy. Legacy impact is what this is all about. For Special Olympics, incredible opportunity for Special Olympics Southern California, and you'll probably hear from Bill Schumar, the president, later on about the goals that they have as a result. One of the things that we're most proud about was healthy athletes. Healthy Athletes was an opportunity for the athletes to get a 7-point health checkup: eyes, ears, teeth, feet, general health. It was volunteer. They didn't have to do it. And we had a record 5,184 athletes that went through all of the disciplines. We distributed 1,300 prescription eyeglasses, lenses ground right then and there. For many of them, first time their eyes were ever corrected. Over 300 hearing aids were fitted. Many of them came not being able to hear. There's a whole team of 10 athletes, basketball team, and they came together as a team because they were all deaf. 8 of them qualified to be helped with hearing aids, and ESPN did a feature on their first basketball game when they were on the court, being able to hear the game that they play. And they even have this shot of the coach calling out instructions to the team, and an athlete turns to him, and the coach turns to the camera saying, "First time he's ever recognized my voice." 600 comprehensive dental procedures. The first day I was there, they had scheduled 26 root canals. The setup at USC was just remarkable. 5,000 pairs of shoes were distributed, brand new tennis shoes. 40% of all the athletes were wearing the wrong size shoe. And to watch them throw their old shoes away and put on the new shoes was quite the sight. But the legacy piece of this is what Healthy Athletes is really about. By the way, we also had an athlete who came deaf and couldn't talk. Turns out it's because there's so much wax in his ear. A doctor took out the wax and had as bad as this sounds, had this mound of wax sitting in front of this athlete. Later that day, the coach came back to the doctor and said, "What, did you give him a drug or whatever? We can't shut him up now." And he just couldn't talk because he had so much wax in his ears. So we take for granted in the United States all that's going on around the world, I think, with people, particularly in the area of health. But for doctors, dentists, nurses, med students to volunteer and fall in love with our athletes and see the need, and then go back to their practice or start their careers and provide services to this underserved population is really what Healthy Athletes was all about. And then there was just more inspirational stories than you can count. For those of you there, we encourage all of our employees, all of our staff for the World Games you got to take the time to find that moment that was special for you. For me, the moment that summed it up was I was at UCLA at the festival, and a mom came up to me with her young son who has Down syndrome. Classic, blonde, crew cut, black rim glasses. The mom comes up and she grabs both of my hands and says, "I just have to thank you." She said, "Not in my wildest dreams did I ever imagine that this would happen in his lifetime." And that's what that was all about, to see the community come together and to see this effort here, and to see the effort that's happening with Angel City Games and what's happening with the CIF and Commitment for Inclusive Sports. We're feeling this groundswell of opportunity for youth with disabilities that I think is just remarkable. And I think that that's what's going to happen as Angel City Games grows and parents come out saying, "Not in my wildest dreams did I think my son or my daughter would be doing that on the track." Same thing in high school sports. The model for us for the World Games was a 3-point thing, and it was painstakingly difficult. We start with educating people. So many people have heard of Special Olympics. I'm sure with the programs that you're involved with, so many people have heard of the disability or the issue or whatever, but to really explain what it's about, to really explain the program, so it takes a lot of education. So we take the time to educate. Then we would inspire. We would educate, inspire, and engage. And so after we'd educate, then we'd go through the process of inspiring, is why it's important to the people, why it's important to the community, why it's important for your business to get involved, why it's a value proposition for your employees to come out and volunteer and come back actually as better employees, team building opportunities, employee retention, all those kinds of things. And then we would engage, we would ask. So once you've educated, inspired, and then we would engage and say, here's how you can be a part of this. And whether that's volunteers, fans in the stands, whether that's donors, individual donors, or corporate sponsors, or foundations. I know there's foundations in the room here today that help support us. All of that was the compelling reason for helping us. And I think there are so many compelling reasons represented in this room today that's what we found. That's what we found effective: educating, inspiring, and engaging. And then I really want to emphasize the legacy impact of everything that we do. As we think about changing hearts and minds of others, realizing that that's the long-term impact that we can have for the future youth in our communities, to have better lives, better health, better education, better opportunities, and really focus on changing hearts and minds towards joining us in the effort. And then just, there's a lot of different entities represented, and because I'm up here, a lot of the focus, goes to Special Olympics. But imagine what would happen if we, as a community, would come together and share best practices, figure out smart alliances, share resources. Imagine what we could do as a community to change the lives of people with intellectual and physical disabilities. Imagine if we truly celebrated differences through the power of sports and all that came in contact with the efforts. We started late because of things, but I'd be happy. I'm going to be here for the rest of the day, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. Again, I just want to thank LA84 and the effort. My desire is that this becomes an incredible resource for this subject matter, and that becomes a place where everyone can come together and really accomplish great things. So thank you very much for being here, and have a great day. Thank you.